Hi everyone. Get ready to hear how I exposed my wife and best friend's shocking betrayal. I, 34 male, met my wife, 33 female, 10 years ago at a small art gallery in the city. My best friend, let's call him Oliver, was an artist and he was showing a piece there. My wife was there with one of her friends and I approached her as soon as I saw her. I thought she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen and I had to be with her. My wife's friend, let's call her Mia, actually ended up going home with Oliver that night. Somehow Oliver and I ended up marrying best friends. We thought it was funny, but it was really perfect for all four of us. We went on double dates together all the time. We took trips together and we even planned vacations together. The four of us were practically inseparable. My wife was a librarian, so she didn't have much opportunity to travel for work. However, I worked in advertising and I traveled often to film commercials. We were used to my schedule for the most part. Oliver and Mia both worked from home on a business that I ran together online. So when I was gone, I knew that my wife spent a lot of time with Oliver and Mia. I didn't mind it at all. I was glad that she had somebody there to keep her company. During one of the work trips that I had planned, my computer had an issue with the screen, so I sent it to Geek Squad to have it repaired. While I was gone, I took my wife's computer since she rarely used it at home anyway. I got to my hotel room when my plane landed and went to use the computer to check some emails and get some work done. You can always tell when somebody clears a history on something. My wife didn't use the computer a lot, but I knew that she used it. There should have been histories of Christmas gifts she was planning on buying, bookstores, and her personal email accounts. However, the history was completely blank. I was a little curious about why she cleared the history before giving me the computer. Granted, it was her personal computer and she probably looked things up that she didn't want me to know about. If the shoe were on the other foot, I would have cleared my history before giving my computer to my wife. I didn't give it too much thought after that because I didn't think that my wife would do anything sketchy. However, moments later, I accidentally logged into her email using the saved information that she had instead of using my own. It sounds convenient, but it genuinely was an accident. I was so used to using my credentials that way that I just pressed OK without giving it a second thought. I went to log out of it right away when I realized, but then I saw an email exchange between my wife and Oliver. The message in the inbox was the most recent one out of a 280 email chain. I knew that they were friends. All four of us were. I had no idea that they were having private conversations with each other. Struck me as very odd. I clicked on it to see what it was and I was completely broken by what I found. They were having an affair with each other. They were sending each other explicit videos and images through email and planning the times when they would be able to get together. I didn't read through all the messages, but I did look at some of the first ones that they sent to try and figure out when it started. The affair had been going on for 2 years. Anytime I was away from home, Oliver and my wife took that opportunity to be together. They slept together even when I wasn't on a working trip. There were times when my wife would sneak Oliver into the library after it was closed and have sex with him when nobody else was in the building. Early on, there were some emails about possibly bringing me and Mia in on the situation and swinging. It was Oliver who suggested it, but my wife immediately told him that I wouldn't be okay with it. She was right to think that. Oliver thought that Mia might have been convincible, stating that he thought she would be gullible enough to just do what he wanted. I thought that was a horrible thing to say. I ended up converting all of those emails into a PDF and keeping that for myself. I marked the most recent message as unread and logged out to make it seem like I had no idea what was happening. I was going to be away for 3 days working and I had to focus on what I was doing or I could risk losing my job. It was absolute torture trying to pretend like nothing was happening when it felt like my entire world was shattering. I had the PDF and I needed to figure out the best way to utilize it. My wife and best friend had both betrayed me and I wanted to get back at them and make them regret ever crossing me. I mulled over what I could do when I returned and it finally hit me. It was the middle of summer, and it wasn't anything out of the ordinary to invite Oliver and Mia over for a barbecue and some drinks. I suggested it for the weekend when I got back and my wife was all for it. They showed up on that Saturday and everything was normal. While we were eating, I brought up to everyone the possibility that we trade partners for the night. It was a joke. I had no intention of doing that, but I just wanted to see their reactions. Mia was appalled by what I suggested, but noticeably my wife and Oliver weren't that shocked. Oliver's lack of reaction actually upset Mia quite a bit. My wife pulled me aside and asked me about why I suggested that, but I just went back to the table and I told Oliver that it was his idea after all. I quoted what he said in the email and mentioned that he thought that Mia would be gullible and would go for it. She was very confused, so I handed her a couple of pages of the email highlights that I printed out. She read over them and from the context she figured out what was happening very quickly. She immediately started screaming at my wife and Oliver about what they did. She was hysterical and upset about everything, and I didn't blame her. I felt the same way when I first found out. Oliver tried to punch me in the face. He accused me of ruining his life. I didn't fight him as much as I wanted to take my anger out on him. I knew that it would only lead to more drama. My wife tried to explain what was happening to me, but nothing she said helped her. Basically, she said that she and Oliver had always been attracted to each other, and after a while they couldn't take it anymore. They ended up sleeping together. She told me that she didn't think monogamy was for her either, which would have been nice to know before I was married to her for 6 years. Mia and I both ended up divorcing them and pretty much taking everything from them in the divorce. They said that they were attracted to each other, but after everything happened, they didn't even try to be together. Oliver desperately tried to get back with Mia because he said that it was a mistake and she almost gave in to be with him. I was able to talk her out of it. I sent the information about my wife sleeping with Oliver in the library to her boss, and she was fired. Now she lives in a studio apartment in the city. She's reached out to me several times apologizing and suggesting that we give it another try. I think she's realized just how good she had it with me and regrets her choices now. I'm in a good place now after all of this, and I don't want to look back at any of it. I'm finally ready to put myself back out there and move on from it completely. I can't even imagine finding out that the two people you should have trusted most in the world have betrayed you while you're away from them and have to pretend like nothing happened. It must have been unbearable for you to go through that. It definitely sounds like Oliver wasn't a good guy by any means. Saying that he could manipulate his wife into doing something even if she didn't want to do it is very creepy. It's a really good thing that you convinced her not to get back together with him when he tried. She likely would have been very unhappy with him after everything anyway. I always think using the excuse of not wanting to be in a monogamous relationship after cheating is ridiculous. If you feel that you might be polyamorous, then you need to discuss that with your partner before you cheat on them. If it comes down to it, you might not be compatible, and that's okay. Cheating is never an option. It sounds like she was just using that as an excuse to make it seem like she was more sympathetic. Anyways, let's now get into our second story for my 28 male, fiancé 26 female, and I met at a bookstore about 3 years ago. She was working there at the time, and I was going to pick up some new books. She was stocking the shelves, and I saw her and thought she was cute. I asked her for some help looking for a particular book, and we walked off together. We started talking, and I asked her for her number, and things took off from there. I proposed to her about 2 years into the relationship. I knew from the moment that we met that she was something special. I knew I wanted to be with her, and I saw a future with her. Our relationship was great from the start, except for a few issues that we had to work through based on her past relationship. Her ex-boyfriend, who we'll call Ben, was her first serious relationship. They were together for 7 years, and throughout the entirety of it, he was cheating on her and treating her like garbage. She was single for about a year before we met. During that time, she said she did a lot of self-discovery and healed from the relationship, though it didn't always seem like that to me. I never gave her any reason to suspect that I was cheating on her, and I treated her like a queen. The only issue that ever came up was when she started to feel insecure about herself. The relationship she had with Ben put a toll on her, and there were times when she thought that she wasn't good enough to be with someone like me. Ben was a sleaze. He couldn't hold down a job. He was sleeping with anybody that would pay him any attention, and he berated her for the smallest things. I didn't do any of that. I had a great job. She was the only woman for me, and I made sure she knew how wonderful I thought she was. I would treat her with respect, and she wasn't used to it. I knew she had a lot of trauma from that relationship, and I did everything in my power to help her get through it. But I could only do so much. It was on her to take care of her trauma and recover from it. As much as I loved her, it didn't seem like she was willing to take those steps. I hate even saying it because it sounds so insensitive, but it's the truth. I suggested that she go to therapy or see a counselor, but she would tell me that she couldn't afford it. I even offered to pay for it, and she didn't want to do that. All I could do was hope the situation would get better over time. I worked a regular 9-to-5 job in the office, and she was working at the bookstore. Her hours were less regular than mine. Some days she would go in around 10 a.m. and some days she would go in around 2 p.m. I was always at work when she was leaving, regardless of the time, but I always picked her up afterward because she didn't have a car. Because she took public transportation, we shared our locations on our iPhones, so I could always make sure she was safe. It's not something I normally would have done in a relationship, but she had several run-ins with creepy passengers on buses, and it made her nervous. I also like having that peace of mind. Around the holidays with Black Friday coming up, she was picking up a lot of extra hours preparing for Black Friday sales. Part of that included optional late-night hours that allowed her to prepare new displays and unpack the large quantities of inventory the store received before the sales. When she did that, I didn't see her for dinner or anything like that. I offered to pick her up when she was off her shifts, but she told me that she didn't want to disturb me, so she just planned on taking Uber. I didn't want her to get into some strange man's car in the middle of the night and have something happen, so I stayed up for her regardless. I told her that was the plan, but she insisted on me not picking her up because she didn't want to bother me. The first night that she was gone, I checked her location around 11 o'clock when she was supposed to be clocking out, and I saw that she was at the bookstore. I could see the location updating every few minutes when I checked it to show was in a car on her way home. Everything looked good, so I was less worried. One week, she told me that she was only scheduled to work late 3 days. But on Thursday, she told me that she would be working late again. I wasn't immediately suspicious about that because it seemed like a normal enough thing. I figured maybe another coworker called out or decided they didn't want the extra hours after all. That night, I did what I always did when she worked late. I was up and around the time she was supposed to be coming home. I looked at her location. Only that time she wasn't at work. She was at Ben's house. Right away, I was wondering what she was doing there. Surely, if she had to go over to his house for anything, she would have told me about it. It feels silly to admit it, but I didn't even think that an affair was possible. It never would have crossed my mind that she would be cheating on me with him. I waited for the location to change for about half an hour and it didn't. It wasn't moving at all. I felt weird looking at her location without her knowing. So I waited about 10 more minutes until she would normally be home and I called her. She didn't answer. After that, I started to worry. She never ignored my calls or messages. I knew that Ben didn't have her best interests in mind whatsoever. From what she described, he was never violent with her, but he didn't want her to leave him. I ran through countless different scenarios in my head about what could have been happening. None of them involved her cheating on me. After the location had it moved and she didn't answer my calls, I decided I was going to go see for myself what was happening. I drove over to the house and saw a car in the driveway, so I assumed that Ben was still there. When I checked my fiancée's location, she was still inside the house. I approached the front door, but before I could get there, I heard music coming from the other side. It was the type of music you would have on a sex playlist. It was then that I realized nothing nefarious was happening, and she could have willingly gone there to have an affair. I was frozen for a moment. I didn't know exactly what to do. I had a pretty good idea about what was happening in the house, but I figured if I knocked they could play it off as something that it wasn't. I ended up going back to my house and waiting there. My fiancé didn't come home for about another 45 minutes after I got back. I just rolled over and pretended to sleep while she got ready for bed. I asked her about work the following morning and she told me that it was fine. She even made up a story about some drama that happened. She was lying to my face. She also told me that the late night hours were going to be extended for a couple more weeks. I figured that she was lying about that too. She was preemptively covering for the time she was going to be spending with her ex. That same night, she ended up going back over to her ex's house again. I knew it was happening and I was already preparing to break off the engagement. However, I didn't want to just calmly break it off. I wanted to get some kind of revenge against her. I thought about it for about a week when she was visiting him instead of working, and I came up with something. We were going to be hosting a Friendsgiving dinner at our house, and I figured there was no better time to tell everybody about her affair than then. I almost considered not doing it then because I didn't want to ruin the mood, but toward the end of the meal, I stood up to make a toast. Everybody thought I was going to toast a friendship and my loving fiancé, but I ended the engagement right there. My fiancé was shocked when I made the announcement. I think she thought it was a joke at first, but it definitely wasn't. I elaborated by explaining that I knew she was going over to her ex-boyfriend's house. My fiancé tried to defend it, but she couldn't come up with a good excuse. I just told her that the engagement was off and that she could go stay with Ben if she wanted to be with him so badly. After that, she ran off to the bedroom to go and hide away from everybody because she was humiliated. Everybody else packed their things and left shortly after. When they were all gone, she came back out and yelled at me for humiliating her in front of all of our friends. She told me that she was sleeping with him again, and that was all that it was. She tried to make it seem like because there was nothing emotional involved and wasn't an affair. I didn't believe that there weren't emotions involved. They were together for a long time and she stayed with him through a lot of stuff. She had to have had serious feelings for him to put up with as much as she did. I told her that I wanted her to get out of my house and I gave her a week to gather all of her things and leave. She did end up going back to Ben. I think they're still together, but he definitely hasn't changed his ways, so she must be miserable with him. All of the friends that were with us were definitely on my side. Some of them have tried to make excuses for her behavior by telling me that she might have been manipulated into getting back with him, but I still don't care what the reasoning behind it was. She cheated on me with a man who treated her like garbage, and I just couldn't be with a cheater. OP. It sounds like you were a caring partner who was there for your fiancé. It sounds like she had a lot of trauma from the past relationship with Ben, and it is a shame that she couldn't find a way to move on from that so he wouldn't have any hold over her. I don't know if you had a chance to look through any messages or anything like that, but I would guess that he was probably in her ear and manipulating her. However, that doesn't excuse the fact that she lied and cheated on you. It's sad that she would leave somebody who cared about her so much and treated her so well to be with somebody who would take advantage of her the way that Ben was. I think she must have had a very low view of herself, which is not good for anyone. When you suggested that she should go to therapy or counseling, you were completely correct in that. It sounds like she should consider going. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact. Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. In today's story, OP found out his spouse cheated on him with her manager after he found texts on her phone that described them doing some interesting things in a Walmart parking lot. In today's second story, OP found out his girlfriend of 3 years cheated on him with a coworker. So he kicked her out and now she is begging for mercy after realizing she is homeless and broke. Now let's get into today's stories. I was married and got divorced a few years ago. I found love with a friend I have known for years, who I confided in, who I can only see myself with. She had been in failed relationships, and together we began a new journey with our motto, and so together they built a life they loved. Together we decided that I, who had been in a dead-end job, would resign to embark on a new career. I have gone through specific training, going through a pretty arduous trainee process. This thing has been lengthy with little income. She has been incredibly gracious in keeping the ship afloat, and especially in the last 6 months has carried us both. Eyeing the finish line by the end of the year, I have been eager to get the required licensing and build my book of business so that we could start to do all the things we had discussed. Big picture dreams. Side note, incredible sex life, more laughing than I've ever experienced. I asked her to marry me months ago, and she happily accepted, and we were really riding on a high. The lack of income had taken its toll. I had begun feeling very inadequate, wishing I could provide, give her a sense of security, etc. On multiple occasions she had expressed feelings that she didn't feel secure, and that she often felt alone during the process. I'll admit, I have felt like a shell of myself. I grew up instilled with a hard work ethic, and have confidently assured her that this chapter will be but a blip on our shared journey. I have my faults. I know that I have not been the romantic I was prior to embarking on this career change. I also realize the immense pressure and stress this has put on her emotionally, mentally, and especially financially. So this brings us to last Wednesday, September 28th. She went to an industry event, a yearly thing hosted by an industry leader. I knew who she went with. Her company is small, consisting of the owner, a friend, and a neighbor of the street, her assistant, female, and a few technicians. One particular employee, who I refer to as Jake, has often flirted, who is married, but is apparently divorcing also due to infidelity on her part. My spouse often spoke of the guy as a good worker, but that he had maintained a puppy love with her. I had shaken the guy's hand. He knew who I was. I had voiced my concerns about his flirting, and I had felt secure in knowing nothing was there. Her boss was out of town, so she went to the event with her assistant and Jake. He was their sales manager and made $100,000 a year. She told me it wouldn't be a late night. She arrived at 5:30, and she thought she would head home at 8-ish. 9:30 rolled around, and at that point I was winding down. It was a weeknight after all. We both permanently share our location. My training often had me going out of town, so the location sharing was just a means for us, both in case something happened. I saw she had left the venue and was nearby and in a public place. She was an adult. I didn't need to know everything, but I sent a text just to see. How is it going up there? She replied, it's a great night, and that she would be home soon. She came home and she was on cloud 9, saying the night with the vendors went well, and she was proud of how she represented her company. We went to bed with no issues. The next day, though, I noticed a marked difference in her, especially when she arrived back home from work. There was tension. I asked, is everything okay? She replied yes, but I could tell she was lying. Friday, I had the day off because we were heading out of town to attend an engagement party for us, thrown by a family member of hers. Members of my family were coming down. I got a text afterward that she was running to pick up an order from Walmart for items for the party. My mind at that point had been racing, starting when she arrived home from that event. In an instance outside of my character, I opened her new MacBook and immediately went to her messages. That's when I saw it. She had met up with Jake. There was clearly something going on. I went back and continued reading further back for weeks. It was their flirting escalating in nature. My hands were shaking. There were texts after their meetup in the Walmart parking lot, discussing a kiss, and her enjoying the feeling of being in his arms. I knew she was on her way home. I was shaking. I purposefully left the MacBook open while it was in my home office. It was there. I was outside composing myself when my watch notified me of her arrival through a Ring camera in her driveway. I waited a minute. She was in the house. Upon entering, it was clear she had walked through the front office and had discovered my discovery. She was cold. Without asking, she said, "Yes, it's real. It's happening." The next 30 to 45 minutes were a blur. I was shattered. She was stoic. She brought up the last 6 months and that it was merely a crush, but there were feelings discussed. She said that it was nothing, but I know what I saw. She was defensive though, and to her credit, I invaded her MacBook on my hunch. She said she was going to talk to me that evening. It was the night prior to our engagement party, where both families would be in attendance. She was my person. I immediately made the decision that I chose her, and she replied with the same. We even had our party. We even had sex over the weekend. Over the weekend, we had small discussions, and she was even vocally regretful. Monday rolled around and we were back to reality. She was back at work. She stated that she needed to keep the status quo because they were a small company, and the guy's efforts were needed at that stage in the company's existence. Since Friday's revelation, there were only 3 people that knew. This is already so long. It's late Thursday, and I am broken. I have tried to maintain my cool. She says she loves me. She wants me, that I am her person. She's also very quick to want to move on. I feel like I am approaching a breaking point. Please open your eyes. Do you really believe this woman? If you really need to fix this, the first and foremost thing for her to do will be to quit her job and go no contact with her AP. This is the minimum that she must do. She has to convince you that she is going to fix what she has destroyed through her actions and not through her words. You screwed up by not canceling the engagement party. What makes you think she's just not biding her time to shuffle you out of her life and replace you with him? That's where this is headed. Her behavior post-discovery shows that. She's not even pretending to be guilty. She's a cake eater at best, so of course, she wants to continue on like it never happened. She's not prepared to take the flack for breaking up with you. Do yourself a favor and cut her loose. Send her off to be with Jake. They deserve each other. You deserve much, much better. Now let's get into today's second story. So my ex-girlfriend of 3 years recently cheated on me with her coworker. When I first met her, she had nothing. No job, barely any money, and no car. She was living with her mother until she got kicked out. This isn't the first time she's jumped from house to house with family members or friends, so I took her in to live with me at my mother's house. We've been dating for about 9 months when this happened, but we were already very close and we loved each other. I helped pick her up from school. I gave her a place to stay when she had no job or money. I fought every day at my job to get her to work at my job, and she eventually got hired. I helped teach her how to drive and was there when she got her license. I was there to bring her to her graduation when she really had no one. Eventually, when she was getting financially stable, she wanted to get a car, and I was the one who helped her. It wasn't the best car, but it got her from point A to point B. During our 3 years together, we obviously had arguments, but that's normal. She also was very bipolar and didn't use many manners with people, so sometimes I thought to myself that she was kind of different from me. During the relationship, there were a lot of arguments, and she was that person that didn't like the silent treatment or didn't like to see me ignore her when we needed to cool down. She would keep poking me and provoking me to keep arguing with her, and then get really emotional to the point where she threatened to kill herself if I left her. I will admit there was a time I gave her a 1-inch punch to the arm because I was dealing with a spine injury, and she took my phone away from me when I didn't want to argue. I just wanted to look at TikToks. She grabbed me and even dug her nails into my skin so I would let go of my phone. She pulled me and refused to give my phone back while I had so much pain in my spine and sciatic nerve. I wanted to just ignore the situation and let us cool down. Anyways, fast forward to the situation. She ended up getting depressed and upset about our job because it got so bad. And I agreed with her. So she ended up finding a new job and I was proud of her. She would work overnight and come back home in the morning, But it started getting a little weird because while most couples don't care about not shaving their legs or making sure they're very clean and good looking at times when they're very close, she made sure she looked amazing and made sure to shave almost every day. Mind you, this was a warehouse job, so there was no point in looking amazing there. It had been a month since she started working there, and all of a sudden she started working every day overnight and always had some excuse or some story about why she was going to work early or coming home late. She looked guilty, but I trusted her, so I didn't question it. That was until one day I started getting these gut feelings, like really bad, and I decided to check our tablet and I saw messages of her talking to another guy in a very flirty way, even talking about how they couldn't wait to see each other later, cuddle with each other, and even going out on dates. When I found this out, my world just shattered, and I couldn't believe it. At the time, I was trying to contact her from work, but guess what? She wasn't at work. She was hanging out with him. So my dumb self at the time got upset and gave her PC a good punch, which broke some things out of anger and confusion. She laughed at me on the phone when I was heartbroken, thinking of all our memories, vacations, and our bucket lists. A week later, after kicking her out, she wanted to talk, and we did. But she showed no sympathy and kept denying the cheating and was saying that she needed to love herself right now and that the relationship was getting toxic. I hadn't been showing her the honeymoon stage anymore, and the reason why this all happened was because of me. But mind you, I always took her to sporting events, out to eat, to the movies, etc. Almost every day, even after having surgery. She ended up moving in with this person who was younger than me and had a sports car that she liked all of a sudden, who she barely knew for a month, and she told him that I was abusive and that I never loved her and that she lost weight because she didn't eat, but she never made anything for herself. It was always me making her food or making her smoothies. My mother lived with us to see all this and didn't like the way she treated me. My ex ended up telling me that this guy supposedly was there for her and showed her that he would help fix her and never hurt her. Not only me, but all her friends and our friends cut ties with her because they knew how she was and what she did was disrespectful to all of us. They also hadn't seen the proof. I eventually blocked her on everything and she still lies about things with this guy, even though there's proof. She even told him that I'm still currently messaging her at night when I'm the one who blocked her and I have all the screenshots of her trying to get to me. So what do you guys think? Am I at fault here? OP, you white knighted her. This was an unhealthy relationship dynamic that was destined to fail. That doesn't mean you deserve to be cheated on, but it guaranteed the relationship was never as healthy as you perceive it. Creates a relationship imbalance. You can't save someone. She used you to get herself back on her feet and for refuge, then monkey branched to someone she thought would be better. I know it hurts, but just let her continue being toxic. She'll blow up this current relationship she's in and then probably start to spiral. You don't know it now, but you just pulled a huge leech off your back. Focus on surrounding yourself with great people that make you feel good about yourself. Thanks for taking the time to listen to today's story. Please subscribe if you haven't already. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My wife was recovering from having our first baby. Per the doctor's orders, we were waiting 8 weeks before having sex. She was 24 and I was 26. I felt like we were too young to be parents, but at least we were married for 4 years before conceiving. This was the life I hoped for. I did everything right, according to my family, and it made me feel great. One person I met in my past told me that life isn't as simple and easy as I expected it to be. But I was goal-oriented and willing to follow any successful influencer's advice. I believed fate was on my side. Even with what I'm about to tell you, I still believe fate is on my side, because otherwise I may never have discovered the truth. On one of the last days of waiting, I got a notification at work that there was motion detected outside our house, and a box was delivered. I only worked 10 minutes away, and it was lunchtime, so I decided to pop by unexpectedly. Besides opening my package, I thought I might be able to seduce my wife for the first time in forever. I stopped for flowers. When I got to the house, there was a really nice car parked outside. I didn't recognize it. My original plan was to knock on the door and have her open it, but I decided to use my key. As soon as I walked in, I heard our bed squeaking upstairs. I barged into our bedroom door, without realizing I broke it. I could not believe what met my eyes. My wife was sprawled out on our bed with our baby's pediatrician. She immediately sat up and grabbed her face, repeatedly saying no in disbelief. The doctor panicked and ran. I didn't care. I'd have him on camera fleeing our house with his loose pants, which meant I'd probably be able to prove he was sleeping with my wife, which would certainly get his license revoked. I noticed the baby sleeping in the bassinet, 6 feet away from his mother, as she cheated on his father. My wife immediately began saying how sorry she was, She said he seduced her because he knew she waited long enough to heal. I wanted to throw up, but I was too angry and didn't want to appear vulnerable. I told her she was the sleazy, pathetic mother. I asked her why she couldn't have just said no, why she couldn't have just waited for me to get home. I felt myself starting to break down because I was realizing my marriage was over. I didn't want to forgive her. I didn't want to have sex with her. I told her these things, and she wailed so loud she woke up the baby. My mind started working at a mile a second as I held and bounced our son. I told her that since she was breastfeeding, she could take him with her to her mom's house. Her mother was a strict Catholic, and I wasn't even sure she would let her daughter and grandson move in. She was going to be furious at her daughter's behavior, and I'd make sure she knew the truth at some point. My wife was freaking out, telling me what I already knew, that she would have nowhere to go if we told people the truth. I forced her to move back in with her mother by telling her our house was being fumigated. My ML wasn't too fond of me, so she wouldn't even wonder where I was. After they moved out, a major twist happened. I got an anonymous typed note in the mailbox that said, "Leave me out of it or you won't be around long enough for a second marriage." I was shocked, but immediately knew it was from the doctor. What a piece of crap. I was very amused when I checked our doorbell camera and found him escaping with his pants down. I went to the police and filed restraining orders on him and my wife. Then I made some phone calls. I had a big family, including one lawyer. He agreed to represent me. Before the court hearing, my MIL was basically forcing my ex and son out of her house, so I had to tell her what my wife did and how I got a restraining order because my life was threatened. She was beside herself. She told me I needed to come get my son at least, so I did. My wife absolutely hated this, and I think that's why her mom did it. She was so upset with her, but couldn't kick her out. She had trouble looking at her the same way. As terrible as my MIL was, she knew how necessary and important loyalty to a spouse was. Then you add the fact that my wife was a new mother, cheating with her son's doctor. Before I left with our son, I heard them screaming at each other, and when my MIL told her she wasn't mature enough to be a mother or wife. It was intense, but I'm sure my wife deserved this hellish new reality, stuck in her strict mother's house without me or her son. After the divorce, I was awarded primary custody of our son, and I was able to prove the doctor's unprofessional home-wrecking actions. He was no longer allowed to practice, so he'll have to find something new to do with his life. I am so happy with the outcome from all this. I hate that it all happened, but this wasn't my fault, so I can only adjust and accept the change. She still calls me often, asking for help or complaining about things. She used to say sorry every time, but I told her to stop. I don't always answer her calls, but she does get visitation with our son. This event made me question a lot about life and relationships. I've realized how important it is to love and trust yourself. I knew I could get through this from the moment I was presented with the issue. I knew I had no choice but to go through it, and all I had was my own strength and willingness to go on. I enjoy my life because it's all I have and my son, and I have a whole new routine. My sister watches him while I'm at work, and she loves it. I enjoy my own company and my son's, and when it comes to dating, I just take it slow and make sure everything feels right about it. That's all anyone can do. I hope anyone reading this realizes how great it is to experience life at all. I won't let this painful end to my marriage make me question how wonderful life is. OP, I am so sorry your wife took advantage of your trust by sleeping with your son's doctor. She was not thinking of you or the consequences you would all have to face for her actions. She was selfish, immature, and impatient. I can't imagine why, as a wife with a newborn son, she couldn't have said no to the stranger and waited for her husband to get home. She gave in to the temptation, despite being a married woman with a growing family. I don't think she expected to be caught, which is why this opportunity seemed acceptable. Never cheat on your spouse expecting to get away with it. The truth always comes out, either immediately or unexpectedly. No matter when the truth comes out, there will be consequences, starting with the shame and guilt they feel when they look at their spouse. A beautiful lifelong commitment is full of honesty, loyalty, and constant communication. There's nothing a spouse shouldn't know about their partner. Knowing this, imagine how hard it would be to pretend everything is fine when you know you've betrayed them. You handled this very well. I wish you the best going forward. Now let's get into our second story for today. When our marriage came to an end, my wife was 37, working as a physical therapist for 5 years. I was 35. We were married for 11 years. We were both content without bringing children into the world. We just started going through the process of becoming adoptive parents, but that would never happen for us. I was proud of her for how hard she worked. She loved her job, and I never expected her to do anything she'd be ashamed of. One day she came home early. I was off work that day for some reason, and she looked devastated. I asked her what was wrong, but she didn't want to talk about it right away. When she did talk to me, it was like she rehearsed what to tell me. She said her boss noticed she had accumulated a large amount of vacation time. She pretty much ordered her to take a paid vacation. I didn't understand what was so sad about that, but I did know my wife loved her job and felt restless at home. She'd usually clean or keep herself busy when she had to be home, but this time she stayed in bed. She could barely move. I knew something was wrong, but she wouldn't talk to me. I got the mail and found something alarming. It was a letter to my wife, explaining the reason for her immediate termination. I was shocked. I ran on to find that not only was she fired, she was being sued in court. I was so confused. What was happening? I walked like a zombie into her bedroom, finding my wife lying awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. I threw the papers at her and asked for an explanation. Once she gathered them up, she started hyperventilating. Once she calmed down, she probably figured I was going to find out anyway, so she told me what happened. 8 months ago, she'd gotten a patient to work with, who was in a dirt bike accident. He was learning how to walk again, basically, and couldn't use his hands for anything either. She had fed him, spoke with him, and really gotten to know him. She helped him to go to the bathroom and shower, and when he asked her to help him with something else that wasn't allowed, she did. I was instantly heartbroken. She was mine and I was hers. By helping this guy, she sacrificed her career and marriage. What's worse is he was married too. His wife was the one suing my wife and her employer, maybe because he felt bad about it and told her. Couldn't believe it. She begged me to stay with her because she needed me now more than ever. She didn't love AP. She knew that. She just felt bad for him as his caretaker. I reminded her that the vows we took meant she would be my wife, and only help me with things like that. The same was expected of me for her. She took advantage of the trust she had as a physical therapist, and had sex with her vulnerable patient. For all I knew, she instigated it. She just admitted she spoke with him and got to know him well. Was that her way of telling me she fell in love? His wife didn't deserve this betrayal either, probably while she stood by his side during the long recovery. My wife had a very hard time ahead of her, but I wasn't going to make it any easier. I moved out, waiting for all this to settle before I filed for divorce. After she was found guilty, and in a whole hue of trouble, it was easy for me to win more favor. She owes a ton of money, and can no longer practice physical therapy. I don't know how or if she's moved forward in life. She called everyone she ever met, or came in contact with to ask for help, and was met with a ton of rejections and criticism. She pretty much fell off the face of the earth after that. I don't know if she managed to pay off all that money, or if she was arrested. I never wanted to look into it and find out. By the time I could move back into our house, it was like a tomb of old memories, frozen in a time when nothing was wrong. It was scary. I had help from friends and family to get rid of all that stuff, and put the house up for sale. With the profits from that, I bought a nicer house on land with horses. I grew up with horses, so it really feels like home. I also decided I wanted my home, horses, and self to become a haven for a child in need. Since my wife abandoned me before we were able to adopt, I did it myself. I adopted a 10-year-old girl who's now 15. I've kept very busy living life on a farm, and with my daughter's help, I give horseback riding lessons. It's like I've lived more than one life, and became a better person after my failed marriage. I'm proud I made it through, and I'm happy my ex suffered through the reality of her choice. Although she says this man initiated the contact, there's no way to know that, and no matter who initiated it, it never should have happened. 2 marriages and your wife's promising hopes for the future were ruined. She obviously wasn't expecting to be caught, and thought it was okay to risk it all for one encounter. It's a shame she couldn't see it would be the worst decision of her life. Marriages are meant to make people stronger and encourage personal growth. This can help people to become a source of light to those around them. It's a beautiful thing when it happens as it should. You grew wiser because of this unexpected life change. You became a beacon of hope for yourself and your daughter, without the help of anyone else. You are an inspiration, and I wish you continued peace and prosperity. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My wife and I have been together for 15 years, and they were some of the best years of my life. When I met her, we were both in our late 20s and very focused on our careers. It was one of the most important things in our lives at the time, and I appreciated how ambitious she was. We started dating, and we both knew that no matter what, our personal success came first. A lot of people think that might not sound healthy, but we were both very independent, and we helped each other so much along the way. My wife had a bit of a health scare, which I won't go into details about due to privacy, but after that, she wanted to slow down and appreciate life over work. She told me that she wanted a child, and I thought it was a good idea as well. When she got pregnant, she quit her job, and I was left being the sole provider for our growing family. I made good money, but being the only provider put a lot more stress on me and my work than what had previously been there. Over the course of 15 years, we had 3 children and created a wonderful life together. Throughout all of these years, there was one small hitch in our relationship: her best friend. They had been friends since they were in grade school. He was my wife's oldest friend. They knew each other better than anyone else on earth, and they cared deeply for each other. It was difficult for me to understand their friendship, because I always thought that he had more than platonic feelings for my wife. I just got a sense from him that he had always been waiting for her to see that he was standing right in front of her. He had been single for the majority of our marriage. He spent years as a playboy with relationships, never lasting more than 6 months. My wife was always trying to set him up with her friends, but he never seemed to want to settle down. Then one day he meets some months when he proposed to her. My wife was completely shocked by the news. She was happy, but she was surprised. She kept questioning him about whether or not he knew for sure she was the one for him. Honestly, at one point I felt like his love life had taken up a significant part of my wife and I's conversations. So I mentioned not wanting to talk about it anymore. My wife was annoyed with me for saying that because he was her best friend and she wanted to talk about it. I explained that it made me uncomfortable that she was taking up such a big part of his life in regard to his romantic relationships. She thought I was kind of crazy for thinking that way. We argued about their relationship, and I ended up sleeping on the couch that night. The following day, she told me that I had nothing to worry about with their relationship. He was her oldest friend and nothing more than that. I accepted what she said and moved on. She never gave me any reason to believe anything else, and I had let my own insecurities get the best of me. She hadn't known the fiancé very well, so she stepped in to help with some of the wedding planning. It was something she had worked with before she quit her job, so she knew a lot of ins and outs of the industry. At least once a week, when she would come home after helping the fiancé, she would complain about how much she didn't like her. She was constantly telling me about how she thought their relationship wasn't going to last, and she wanted to try and talk to her friend about it because she didn't think they were a good fit. In hindsight, she was very jealous. I think she realized her friend was going to be less interested in her, so she didn't like the fiancé. As the date for the wedding drew near, she spent more time with her friend and fiancé helping them prep for it. I saw her less and less, and I was getting frustrated. Not to sound like some chauvinist, but I worked between 8 to 10 hours a day, and a lot of times I had to take work home with me to finish up as well. While she was planning the wedding, I was coming home from work and cooking dinner, then cleaning up the mess while she was out. For the past 15 years, she had been doing all of that. I was getting very exhausted because I felt like I was working a lot and then coming home and taking care of the house. One night my wife and the fiancé were in our living room looking through some magazines and putting together some ideas. Her friend was there, somewhat disinterested in everything that was happening, though I could see that he was peeking over at my wife quite frequently. I was used to him looking at her. That was one of the main reasons I suspected he had feelings for her to begin with, but the fact that he was still staring at her longingly while he was engaged was rubbing me the wrong way. A couple of days later, my wife told me that she was going over to their house to help with some preparations. About an hour after she told me she left, the fiancé knocked on my door and told me that she had left a pair of sunglasses in our living room. I told her that I wished she'd have just let us know so my wife could have brought it over to her house that afternoon. She then informed me that my wife was not at her house. We didn't know where she was. I asked her about where her fiancé was, and she told me that he was at the office working. It was a Saturday, and over the years that I'd known him, he had never been one to go above and beyond and show up for work on Saturday. Right away, I believed that my wife lied to me about planning the wedding to go spend time with him. I explained that to the fiancé, and she was enraged when I told her that. She thought the idea that my wife and her fiancé were together was preposterous. I was able to convince her to join me while we went to look for them. Thankfully, with our phone plan, we had a family GPS tracker installed, so I was able to find out where she was. The GPS tracker took us to an old strip mall where most of the buildings had been vacated decades before. We saw both of their cars in the parking lot and slowly approached them. When we drove up closer to my wife's van, we saw her and her friend inside having sex. They didn't notice us until I knocked on the window, and they both jumped and tried to cover themselves. The fiancée opened the door as soon as she heard the lock click and nearly dragged my wife out by her hair. I hadn't been expecting her to physically assault anyone, so I was able to separate them and get my wife away from her. My wife and her friend tried to explain what happened to us. They said that they just needed to figure out if there was anything there before he got married. I suppose she forgot about how she had been married to me for 15 years. If there had been something with him, did she plan on just leaving me and the children? All I knew was that she wouldn't have to worry about that anymore because I was going to be leaving her. The fiancé yelled at my wife's friend and called him just about every name in the book before throwing her ring in his face. I told my wife that I wanted her to go and stay with her parents while we figured everything out. I met with a lawyer as soon as I could because I knew we were going to have a difficult divorce battle ahead of us. When we got married, we signed a prenuptial agreement to keep all of our assets separate from each other. But when my wife quit her job, that changed a lot of things. Because she cheated, I didn't want to give her anything. But I was worried I was going to have to pay her spousal support. My attorney was amazing, and they were able to get me out of doing that. Unfortunately, my wife was able to keep the house. That didn't matter too much to me because I didn't want any reminders of the time she might have spent with her friend in the house. Even though she got the house, she ended up having to sell it for a portion of what was paid for it because she couldn't afford to upkeep it on her own. She ended up having to get a job as well, and I knew she was unhappy about that after spending years out of the field. We now have joint custody of our children, and they have a lot of resentment toward their mother for destroying their family. I don't want them growing up hating their mother just because of what she did to me, so I try to swallow my pride as much as I can. But sometimes it's hard. She tried to date her friend after everything was finished, but they both realized there really wasn't anything there. After sleeping with each other, they weren't even able to get back to being friends. They ended up no longer speaking to each other. Right now, I'm just focused on reestablishing a life for myself with my children. I'm not too worried about dating. OP, I'm so sorry to hear that you had to go through all of that. You spent 15 years of your life dedicated to someone else who was very quick to throw it all away. It's such a shame that she showed her true colors to you so late into the relationship. Hearing about how close she was to her friend was somewhat of a red flag. That's not to say that men and women cannot be friends with each other, but in a lot of cases you should trust your gut when you believe there are feelings there. It definitely sounds like he was having a hard time with relationships because he had feelings for your wife. Instead of shutting you down when you questioned it, your wife should have listened to what you said and done something to assure you they were just platonic. On top of that, it definitely does sound like your wife was jealous of the fiancé. Why else would she have disliked her more than all of the other women? As soon as her friend decided he wanted to be happy focusing on someone else, she decided that she did have feelings for him after all and couldn't let him be happy. I know having a divorce after all this time can be difficult too, but it sounds like you have a good head on your shoulders and you're focused on the important stuff. I hope you and your children can recover from all of this and live a happy life in the future. Now let's get into our second story for today. I, 24 male, and my girlfriend, 24 female, had known each other for years before we both confessed our feelings to each other and started dating. We were in the same friend group in college, and ever since I met her I had feelings for her. But I was too nervous to come out and tell her about them. She actually ended up drunk messaging me one day telling me that she thought I was cute and funny, and she had a little bit of a crush on me. I made sure to wait until she was sober to respond so I could make sure she was sure about what she was saying. We have been together ever since my sophomore year of college. All of our friends thought we were a great couple. We were even voted as the best couple in our senior yearbook. It felt validating to have other people look at our relationship as something they wanted to work toward in their own lives. After college, we both moved in together and got jobs to start our lives with. I felt like our relationship was thriving for a long time. About 4 years into our relationship, my girlfriend came to me and told me that she thought she might be bisexual. I'm a very progressive person, so I didn't think much about it. I told her that I was there for her to talk to if she needed an ear, and I was there for her when she told her family. Her family wasn't the most understanding at first, but they eventually came around. After a conversation, we discussed what her sexuality looked like in our relationship. I have a lot of friends in the LGBT community, and I've heard a lot about the bisexual erasure that has happened within a lot of media and different communities. I never wanted her to feel like she was missing a part of herself by being in a relationship with a man. She assured me that she didn't feel that way at all. Because she was bisexual, she was happy being in a relationship with me, but with her sexuality that meant that she was just attracted to women also. A few months passed since we had that conversation, and everything was as normal as it ever was with us. Her revelation didn't have much of an impact on our relationship, though I was doing what I could to educate myself to make sure she was feeling seen and heard in the relationship. My girlfriend started to withdraw herself from me, and I was worried that there was something I was doing that was wrong, so I asked her about it. She told me that there was nothing that I was doing, but she was feeling a little off in general. She asked for a little bit of space and I gave it to her. She stayed with her parents for the weekend and I stayed home and waited for her to come back. She needed space, so I wasn't texting her and calling her or anything like that. I waited for her to respond to me before I did anything. When she came back, she was back to her old self. I was happy to see that that little bit of space was enough to help her overcome what she was going through. I asked her about it the day she came back, and she told me that she was just not feeling like herself and needing some time to recuperate from that. I didn't question it any more than that. A few weeks passed, and she was once again withdrawing herself from me. I didn't know what was going on, but if it was something to do with her mental health, I thought that she might need some help or someone to talk to, so I asked her about it again. She seemed surprised by what I was saying, as if she hadn't even realized she was acting a certain way. She just told me not to worry about it. She stayed like that for about a month. My mom came into town and I took her out to lunch while my girlfriend ended up staying behind at the apartment. She asked me about what was going on with my girlfriend and I explained everything to her. My mom was immediately concerned about it, but not for the same reasons I was. When I was young, my father cheated on my mother and she never quite recovered from that. When I explained what happened, my mom immediately associated it with how my father acted while he was having an affair. As soon as she said that, I rejected the idea. There was no way my girlfriend would cheat on me. We had an incredible relationship and I was always there for her when she needed me. There was no chance that she was cheating. My mom told me that she couldn't be sure either, but it was something that I should keep my eyes open for just in case. She even gave me some tips on how to try and catch her if she was. I went home somewhat annoyed by the conversation that I had with my mother, but I couldn't get it out of my head. The more I thought about what she said, the more I realized there might be some merit to it. Even if she wasn't cheating, there very well could have been something that she was hiding from me. I didn't know how to ask my girlfriend about it. If there was something that she was going through, asking her if she was cheating on me may only make things worse. Later that night, we both lay down to go to bed and I couldn't fall asleep. After I heard my girlfriend snoring beside me, I snuck around her side of the bed and grabbed her phone to look through it. I felt guilty while I was pulling it off the charger. Neither of us had ever done anything like that before, but it was almost compulsive. The idea that my partner might be cheating on me had completely taken over my mind and I couldn't think about anything else. I stepped out of the room and looked through her phone, searching for any signs that she might be having an affair. I found those signs in droves. One of the first things that I noticed was that in one of her folders she had the Hinge app downloaded. Of course, I went on there and I looked through the app, where I saw that she had been matched with several women. I looked through some of the messages and one stood out in particular. There was a woman that she matched with whom they had both spoken about how they were in similar situations. They realized that they were attracted to women while they were in relationships with men, and they felt like they needed to explore that attraction. They both admitted to being in committed monogamous relationships while also setting up a time to hook up. The first time that they hooked up together was when my girlfriend went to spend time at her parents' house when she told me she needed time apart. I was upset to learn that she had lied to me about what she was going through and where she was going so she could sleep with another person. According to the messages, they both enjoyed their time together and planned to continue their relationship. I found countless messages where they had been flirting and exchanging sexual messages with each other. I screenshotted all of the information that I found and sent the information to myself before deleting it. I knew right away that I was going to be ending things with my girlfriend. It didn't matter to me that she was exploring her new identity. We were in a committed relationship and she cheated on me with someone else. The next day she told me that she was going to go to her parents' house again. She said that she agreed with me and thought that she wasn't acting like herself, so she thought it would be good to have some time alone again. I just nodded my head and said that sounded like a good idea. When she left, I followed her. She went to a motel and shortly after the other girl joined her there. I was able to get a couple of pictures of them kissing in the doorway, but everything else happened behind closed doors. I assumed that if she was taking the entire weekend to go back home with her parents, she would be spending the weekend with that girl. So I reached out to her boyfriend. I told him about what happened and what I saw, and shortly after he called me. He didn't want to believe what I had to say, but I assured him that what I saw was true and that they were having an affair. We agreed to meet up at the hotel the following day. We were going to surprise them at the hotel and end everything with them. When he arrived, I knocked on the door and heard a lot of shuffling on the other end. My girlfriend opened it with a smile, but when she saw who was behind the door, it quickly faded away. The other girl was in the room, lounging on the bed. Her jaw dropped when she saw her boyfriend standing at the door. They tried to explain what they were doing there, but I stopped them and told them that we knew everything that was happening. I broke up with my girlfriend right away and told her that I wanted her out of the apartment. The other man told his girlfriend that he wanted her to move out of his house and that he wanted nothing to do with her. I felt even worse when he asked for a ring back from her. I had no idea they were engaged. I walked away to go to my car and my girlfriend chased behind me trying to apologize for what happened. I told her I didn't want to hear anything that she had to say, but she tried to tell me that it wasn't cheating because it was with a woman. It didn't make any sense why that would be the excuse she gave. She was having sex with another person. I didn't care that it was a woman. I didn't think it was hot that she was sneaking around behind my back. She was my girlfriend and I loved her and she betrayed me. Honestly, I was offended that she would think I would be okay with it because it was a woman. She didn't know me at all and that was clear. I just drove away and told her one last time that I wanted her out of the apartment. She ended up having to move back home with her parents, who were very surprised that she had cheated on me to begin with, and even more so that it was with a woman. I felt bad that she was going to have to live with people who weren't necessarily the most accepting of who she was, but at the same time I didn't want to think too much about her. I just can't understand why she wouldn't talk to me about what she was feeling. Throughout the entirety of our relationship, I had gone out of my way to make her feel understood and heard, and she still took advantage of our relationship and betrayed my trust. OP. I'm so sorry you had to go through something like this. It does sound like you did everything you could to make your girlfriend feel comforted and safe, and she threw it all away. You did the best that you could to comfort her when you thought she was going through something, and she took advantage of that to lie about where she was going so she could have an affair. I know there are a lot of people who fetishize women in relationships with other women, but regardless of that, she still cheated on you. Cheating is cheating, and it doesn't matter who it was with you took someone's trust in you and broke it. This is an interesting case because I can understand how she might have felt like she was missing something by not exploring her identity more, but that's something that could have been discussed with you. Maybe even in this situation it would have been better for her to break up with you and take some time to herself to explore before settling down, but it seems like she wanted the best of both worlds. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me.